I haven't done a ranking video in a while, but I think it's finally time to make another one. Skylanders Imaginators has been my favorite game in the franchise for a while now, and since I've finally completed my collection, I figured a ranking of the senseis would be the perfect one to do. I don't want to waste too much time because there's 31 senseis, so each of them is kind of going to be a very brief explanation for why they're in their specific spot, otherwise this video could take forever. This is going to be also mainly my opinion. I would say it's about 20% based on the Skylanders design, 30% based on how objectively powerful and good that Skylander is, and 50% based on just how fun that Skylander is to use. That's pretty much the criteria I'm using to rank these figures. Without further ado, let's jump right into it with the number 31. 31st place sadly has to go to Dr. Neocortex. It isn't really a hot take to say that Dr. Neocortex is the weakest sensei. I think he definitely is. He has extremely low health and his damage isn't really that good either. His battle class also doesn't make sense, and then compared to all the other senseis, his design is just not that unique or interesting. Of course, it's because he came from Crash, so gotta give him some sort of excuse, but honestly, he's just the weakest link of the senseis. Number 30 is going to be Crash Bandicoot. Of course, it's kind of just the same situation with Neocortex. This guy has very low health. Of course, he does have extra lives to make up for it, but that doesn't really fix the issue. As well as his attacks are fun, but they never really feel that powerful. I feel like his attacks, although they can sometimes be fun to use, and it really depends on the attack, they're a lot of the time still pretty weak and will take a long time to actually defeat enemies, which is why Crash Bandicoot's number 30. Number 29 is actually going to be Hoodsicle. I personally do not like Hoodsicle. I think he was better in Trap Team. I think that handled him a lot better. In this game, he just feels too slow, too sluggish, and I feel like his attacks are just too different from what I want from him. I want some sort of speed move that will actually like help with his speed, because he seems extremely slow, and his primary attack, while it might do decent damage, is not fun to use. It's like this slow spinning swing that just is not very effective, and it doesn't really work for me. In 28th place is going to be Mysticat. Mysticat, right off the bat, his design I think is horrible. I really do not think his design is appealing whatsoever. His gameplay I think is a little more complex and a little more fun than Hoodsicle's, while Hoodsicle might actually just be a little bit more powerful, just on a grounded level. But I think Mysticat has some cool stuff going for him, but he's still just, I think his design is so bad, and his whole moveset is almost too complex where it gets confusing for me. In the 27th place is actually going to be Ambush. I know this is going to shock a lot of people. I'm not a big fan of Ambush. I think his attacks are almost so fluent that they feel like sometimes you're not even hitting enemies. They're just going straight through them. I don't want to feel like I'm hitting air. I want to feel like I'm actually like doing damage to the enemies. That's my main problem with Ambush. Other than that, he's got some fun stuff. I think his moveset's pretty decent overall. I just really don't like that. He feels too flowy to me. I don't feel like he feels that powerful. It's a really weird issue to have, but it does hold him back a lot in my opinion. Now, 26 is going to be Kingpin. Now, a lot of people might be confused by this as well, and I kind of am as well, because I don't really know exactly why I don't like Kingpin that much, but he's just not that good in my opinion. I think he's just not as fun to use as a lot of the other senseis. It might be because he's more simple, maybe he's in the starter pack. I don't know. He's got some cool attacks, and at this point, we're getting the sensei roster is so good that it's like a lot of them, even starting with Kingpin, are really good Skylanders. I would say if Kingpin is a decent Skylander, he's just, compared to the other senseis, he just doesn't hold up for me personally. Now, number 25 is going to be Aurora. She does kind of have the same issue as Kingpin and Ambush of just feeling like a little bit more of a simple Skylander, more like grounded level and less of a complex moveset. But I think her moveset works well. She is like the fastest Skylander out there, which is a pretty cool gimmick, and she can do some cool stuff with her swords. I don't think Aurora is that bad. I just think she's a bit boring compared to a lot of the other senseis that have more complex and more thought out movesets than Aurora's. I feel like she was kind of just thrown together, but she is still a good sensei. Number 24 is going to be Airstrike. I've kind of got a love-hate relationship with Airstrike. I love his bird. Sometimes I love using him. I like the attack where he can suck it on the enemies and throw out punches in every direction. But a lot of it, he just feels too small and too weak and too, like, just everything. I don't know. This guy, there's just something about it that does not work for me for an Air Skylander. Like, put him next to Wildstorm, and who would you rather play as? It might be just because his size. He's so small as a sensei. I don't feel like he's doing that much damage, although he probably is. I still think he's a decent Skylander in the end. Now, number 23 is going to be Bad Juju. Bad Juju doesn't do anything wrong, but I just don't feel like she's that special compared to the other senseis. She has an attack where she can shoot lightning down from the sky, which is kind of cool, and she has an attack where she spins around with her blades. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, she can do some stuff with her little child, but her, like, mini Juju or whatever it's called, like Juju Jr., I think. It's pretty cool to see some of that, but it's mainly just revolving around her third attack, which is her lightning strike anyways, so it just doesn't really impress me that much. Number 22 is going to be Chopscotch, and this is kind of the breaking point where like all the senseis from now on are definitely above average, pretty good Skylanders at the very minimum. Chopscotch I think is really fun. Her moveset is actually works really well. She has like a charge attack where she can slash her axe forward, and she has a spin attack which has some crazy knockback on enemies and Imaginators, and she can throw her head for some decent range. She pretty much covers all areas, but she doesn't really excel at anything, so it kind of holds her back a little bit, but I still think Chopscotch is a very solid Skylander. Now, number 21 is going to be Ember. Really, the only thing that holds back Ember is her health. She doesn't have too much health, but she is primarily a close-range Skylander, which is pretty fun if you ask me. She has a cool weapon, and she has some cool second and third attacks where she can actually heal herself by making these sort of eruptions out of the ground and stick these sort of lava rocks to enemies, which is pretty cool, and she can rain magma from the sky, which I also really think is cool. Her attacks work well with her design, and I think she's overall a pretty good sensei. Number 20 is Barbella. Really, the only thing holding back Barbella is going to be her design. I don't think her design is good at all, but her moveset works really well. She feels like an Earth Scatter. When you're playing as her, there's always just rocks breaking and flying and destroying enemies all over the place. You're sending out these massive rock cubes, and you're having these giant rock hands come out of the ground and smash into each other. She is just so fun to play as, and the damage is absolutely mind-blowing. I absolutely love everything about Barbella except for her design. That really holds her back. Now, 19 is Boom Bloom. I think Boom Bloom is actually a pretty solid Skylander. She doesn't do anything too crazy, but all her moves do what they need to do. She has some basic life attacks where she can send out some sort of plants and vines that will do sort of passive damage and sort of bring enemies into one spot. And then she has her whip attack, which is just a solid primer. There's nothing wrong with it, but there isn't anything too crazy with it at the same time. I think Boom Bloom is a solid Skylander, but she is pretty average, I would say, as far as the senseis go. Now, number 18 is going to be Tri-Tip. This guy is really a powerhouse of a Skylander with one of the coolest soul gems ever. Literally, meteors will randomly just come down and destroy everything on screen. Tri-Tip is really cool for those reasons. The only thing really holding him back is his third attack where he summons the dinosaur heads out of the ground. It's a cool concept, but it just does not work, and there really isn't any reason to use it. But combining his super powerful attacks with his mobility, I think this guy works out really well, and Tri-Tip will always be one of the best Skylanders in my opinion, and that is saying something considering he's only in the middle of this list. Now, number 17 is going to be Dr. Crankcase. Dr. Crankcase, I know, is a fan favorite, but I actually like him as well. I think he's somewhat in the middle of the pack for the senseis. He's got a decent primary, decent secondary, and decent third attack, which all work well on their own. When you mix all of them together, he becomes a very powerful Skylander. If you mix all of his attacks into one and sort of use all of them in tandem with each other, they will actually do a lot better, which is why I like this guy. He has a pretty complex moveset with all his attacks working together, and that will land him in the 17th spot. Now, number 16 is going to be Chaos. I originally thought Chaos was a lot better, but actually going back and using him now, he feels a little bit like he doesn't have any sort of mobility at all. Pretty much every single one of his attacks, in order to use it, you have to stay completely still. That's really the only thing that holds Chaos back. Other than that, he has a great primary, which is close range, great secondary, which is long range, and then he can summon Doomlanders to fight for him. I think Chaos works really well in this game, other than his mobility issues, which that will land him the 16th spot. Now, number 15 is going to be Buckshot. I didn't used to like Buckshot that much, but actually going back and playing as him, he is really good. He has a ton of invincibility, which is pretty awesome to see, and his arrows do really good damage, and if you use his third attack, you can actually blow up his portals and do some crazy damage and pretty much wipe out the entire screen. He's good against bosses as well because of his invincibility. Sorry, I couldn't speak there. And overall, I think Buckshot just works out very well as a Skylander and as a sensei, which will land him in the 15th spot, kind of near the middle of the list for the senseis. Now, number 14 is going to be Golden Queen. I think Golden Queen is really good at a lot of things. The only thing that I really don't like about her, she doesn't really have anything super up close and personal that'll just like basically smack enemies right in front of her. She doesn't have that. But as far as range and keeping her distance and doing passive damage against enemies, she's really good at it. She can turn them to gold. She can summon her little floating golden orbs that can actually shoot out these little projectiles, and then she can make them shoot faster, and she can have her soul gem where she turns absolutely massive and has her laser eyes and big slam attacks. Golden Queen has got a lot going for her. Number 13 is going to be Flare Wolf. Flare Wolf has pretty much the best combination for any sort of challenge playthrough, as he's got speed and range, which will pretty much be devastating against any enemies. He can get away quickly and keep his distance while he does damage. He also has some really cool attacks. His soul gem creates a giant fiery wolf head, and he can fly up into the sky and rain down attacks on enemies as well as a flamethrower. There's really nothing wrong with Flare Wolf. He's an excellent Skylander in my opinion. Number 12 is Graveclobber. This guy is definitely a powerhouse of a Skylander. He's got a lot of good moves that will just do either passive damage or they're just up close. He also feels great to use, just throwing out these punches and summoning these water geysers that you can then smash all the way through, and belly flopping and sending out these waves of water just feels awesome. He feels so fun to use, and it's not like it's being compensated with bad damage or anything like that. This guy still has great damage and a great design. Graveclobber is just a good Skylander overall. Then number 11 is going to be Wolfgang. Although I'm still mad at him for not carrying over his Smasher type playstyle from Trap Team, he still works pretty well in Imaginators. He can summon these speakers that do pretty good damage against enemies. He can shoot arrows, he can shoot multiple arrows, powered up arrows, and he can create an entire stage and just start rocking out on it and sending out these pulsing waves at enemies that will knock them back, keep their distance, and do good damage. Wolfgang is very fun to use, although I don't think he's really that powerful, but I think he's really good, and of course his design has always been top notch. Now, the number 10 spot will go to Tidepool. Tidepool, I've gained so much respect for. Tidepool has a really fun moveset that you can pretty much just press all the buttons, and either one of them, no matter what you're pressing, you're going to be doing it loads of damage. The best way to use her is just to press all the buttons, send out all her attacks for so much passive and active damage against enemies, and you keep a distance because most of her attacks are ranged, and most of them you don't even need to be pressing a button for. The attack will just do its own thing while you can be going for another enemy. Tidepool is a great Skylander overall. Now, number 9 is going to be Chompy Mage. The fact that this guy can summon 5 gigantic Chompies to just chomp away at enemies and do a ton of damage really kind of explains why he's this high on the list by itself. But Chompy Mage is pretty awesome to use. He can roll around, he can shoot his staff, he can do a lot of cool stuff, and he can sort of scream at the Chompies and create little acorns that blow up. That attack isn't the craziest, but of course, it's classic Chompy Mage, so his design is top notch and his gameplay is really fun as well. And it's actually pretty good against enemies. Number 8 is going to be Robo. Robo, I think, is really solid. The only thing that holds him back is his health, of course, but he does so much damage. His third attack makes it so enemies take a bunch more damage, and then when you roll around as them, they can take up to 900 damage and 600 if it's not a critical hit. His primary is, of course, always going to be solid, and his third attack and primary work very well together. Not to mention his Soul Gem is one of the coolest looking attacks ever, as he just has a massive barrage of absolutely everything possible. Robo is a pretty awesome Skylander. Now, in 7th place is Pit Boss. Pit Boss has got a lot going for him. His primary attack is pretty decent. It doesn't do anything too crazy, but it doesn't really need to because his third attack, or I believe it might be his second attack, where he turns into a giant snake and collects enemies on his back, is super awesome. It can freeze enemies. You can summon a giant snake head out of the ground, just chomp away at all of them, do crazy knockback and crazy damage. Pit Boss is really good at shutting down all the enemies at once, which is why I really like him. Pit Boss is an extremely solid Skylander. And number 6 is going to be Pinata. This is a guy that has actually really grown on me a lot. I used to not like him that much, but now I'm a huge fan of Pinata. I think his third attack is great for dealing with any type of boss, and his primary and second are super fun to deal with just normal enemy types. All his attacks work very well together. He can also shoot a gigantic barf laser of sort of all this candy, which is super awesome to see. Pinata is just fun, a great design, a great moveset, and he's definitely grown on me as I've played as him more. Now, number 5 is going to be Wildstorm. Wildstorm is just everything you want in Skylander. A solid primary, a secondary which offers coverage what the primary doesn't and is also really fun to use, and then a third attack that synergizes with the second attack. They all work so well together, and then you just throw this gigantic, super cool Soul Gem on top of it, which just makes him even cooler, and then his lightning is still going to be very awesome to see. Wildstorm is always a great option for senseis. Now, in 4th place is going to be Starcast. All his attacks are great. All of them have a purpose. His primary does good damage consistently, but it doesn't do anything too crazy. His third attack basically makes it so enemies don't even know where you are, and you have a clone that's doing extra damage. And his second attack, he can ride around on a gigantic ninja star, and then he can turn into a gigantic ninja spaceship, and then just shoot these, like, lasers everywhere. It's super awesome to see. Starcast moveset is so fun, and yet still so good at the same time, and his design is pretty peak as well. Now, in 3rd place is going to be Blaster John. This guy has grown on me a lot as well. I did not used to like Blaster John this much. I never disliked him, but I never thought he was quite a like top 5, top 10 sensei. I thought he was sort of the middle of the pack, but his attacks work so well together. His sort of missiles he can shoot off his back into these big domes of purple energy and have them split and shoot a bunch of rockets at enemies works so well. His Soul Gem where he shoots lasers in all directions, super fun to use. This guy has great mobility, great damage, and his primary is super solid, and his design is pretty top notch for a sensei. Now, in 2nd place is going to be Chain Reaction. Chain Reaction does almost everything perfect. This guy has an attack where you can just plant it in the ground and let it do passive damage. His primary works so well, and it has a mode where you can hold it and knock back enemies and keep them from doing anything to you. He has an attack where you can fly up into the sky. He goes completely invincible, and he shoots lightning down. And when he comes back down, he does a massive slam which knocks enemies back. Literally everything is so perfect with this guy and so fun. Chain Reaction is an awesome Skylander. But in 1st place, Taekwon Crow has really been my favorite sensei the entire time. There have been times where I thought he wasn't the best, but looking back, he's always been my favorite. Taekwon Crow is so fun, and all his moves have a purpose and are fun to use. This is the only Skylander where I feel like every single move really helps his moveset. So, like, without a move, he would not be the same. His primary attack is absolutely perfect, does exactly what you need it to. His secondary attack, the fire kick, is so good at everything. You could just spam this move forever, have so much fun and do so much damage. And then summoning the buzzer beaks and then the massive buzzer beak is just awesome to see. Taekwon Crow is everything I want in a Skylander, and he is pretty perfect, which kind of makes sense. He's the first sensei I ever got, and he's the first sensei I ever considered my favorite, and now after having all of them, I still consider him my favorite sensei of all time. Taekwon Crow is absolutely amazing. This was all just my personal opinion, so I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I will see you guys in the next one. Please tell me which sort of ranking you guys want to see next, because maybe I'll do more if you guys like this video. But thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys later. Bye bye, everybody.